You have a question? Google it, right? This is the source of all answers. I'm here today to talk about your work, your diligence, and what does it take? Do you know how to do a patent search in Google? I'm patent attorney, J.D. Houvener, managing partner here at Bold Patents Law Firm. It's my honor to be here to talk with you about how to structure a patent search in Google. I'm going to go through this and share my screen with you. No jokes. Going through click by click to walk you through the different tips, tools, fields to enter so you can do the diligence that it takes to make sure that your invention is novel in terms of making sure that you're confident before you take the next step in talking with a patent attorney. Before we get started, I want to let you know that we do have some timestamps along the way, so you can fast forward this video to different parts of this advanced Google patent search tool. You'll see that I'll be moving my mouse around, you'll see the screen, so you're probably going to watch the whole thing from start to finish if you can, but if your time's short, you got to just get to the good stuff. Look at down below, you're going to see the different indexes you can move to and forward ahead.
I started with you. So I took the, basically the example you were working with, or you had done for this submersible underwater container. This was from the top reference you had, but just in terms of visualizing what I was thinking the invention was, something like this, where it's like a container that is like able to kind of go a selective distance underneath the water with a propeller and something to secure the container, something that's going to regulate it. And then it's going to be a temperature controlling device that sort of has a control algorithm telling you how deep this is going to be in the water to keep it at a correct temperature.
Right.
So I'll just kind of dive into how I would approach this.
Try not to let this, exactly. Try not to let this PSO guide you really in any way, but you're welcome to pull it up.
Yeah, so some of the first things I would do with this would be to, here we have some real clear, sort of patent attorney version of claim elements, which are very good. Starting from here, I think one of the challenges or things that are important for, inventor to look at, when you're looking at searches like this, are how you're going to, define what your invention is and what its features are. I kind of, if I were the inventor, I'd say, container secured by a net underwater. It can be watertight or for food items. The container has some type of attachment mechanism. Could be a clip, could be Velcro. One thing that people will see, and I'll try to teach folks a bit in this kind of demo, is that the words that you use to describe an invention are different from words your friend would use to describe an invention or components of the invention, and significantly different than what a patent attorney would describe an invention. So, one of the challenges with searches like this, and one of the areas that I'd encourage inventors to depart from, their standard intuition would be to, think of, what words are going to be used to describe different aspects of an invention, and not to pigeonhole yourself in what you think it might be. So the container is going to attach to the net in some capacity. There's going to be a mechanism to move the net up and down, specifically in the invention, or is the way, an inventor may have invented it, that's a propeller. From a patent searching standpoint, ideally, I'd like to find the word propeller, but I'm not particularly concerned with that. You want to search broadly enough. A good patent attorney is going to claim broadly enough if possible, but that isn't constrained by being a propeller. It could be a winch on the boat. It could be some kind of, you can have an airbag that selectively lets out air that, adjusts the buoyancy of the device. So just keeping that, kind of departing from a particular embodiment of your invention, and then thinking about what types of terms could be useful, and searching that is, a good thing to do, both at the beginning and then maybe show you iteratively as as you progress through it. It also has a temperature sensing device, thermometer. So what you want to do here is, I kind of laid out three things that just guidance I would give an inventor looking into how they want to do a search to say, literally, what is it? It's a box with a rope, with a net, with a line, with a tether, with a thermometer, temperature gauge, pressure sensor, depth sensor. You can use words like that that can be helpful. What is it functionally? Like, what are other people going to call similar things? That's an important thing that I think will help, inventors as they do these things. Is, what is it going to do? One of the first things I thought of with this is that maybe this is a fisherman who's out there with a 12-pack of beer on a lake or an ocean that he wants to submerge it 30 feet down in the water where the water's colder to keep it cold. Maybe that is some, what is this doing? Because sometimes you'll find that searching just the specific mechanical aspects of an invention will get you a lot of noise. So, combinations of lots of different approaches, especially with, and then again, what do patent attorneys call this device, and what are its features? That you're probably not going to know unless you are a patent attorney, you've done this a lot, or you get going in the search. And that's something I'll try to point out in a couple examples.
Hey, Brandon, could you make that Word doc bigger as you kind of go through it?
Yes, I had it. And that's most of the. Right when we got set up, I was. Yeah. Is that better?
Yep, it does. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's always good, in addition to, and just looking at this example, I kind of based a lot of what I was looking at, as I mentioned, kind of on this type of figure where you have some type of storage box in here. It's going to contain something. There's going to be a tether above it, line, tether, reel, anything below it, and then some type of mechanism to control the height of it. Where do we want to be? So, as I kind of mentioned, one of the first things, working with an invention like this, JD's outlined a really good approach in the patent tutorials where you want to try some sort of layman's terms, descriptions for an invention, that some things that you might call it, to try to find. You start really broad. You say, okay, let's try to find things that are storing. What are some boxes that are storing things underwater? To regulate its temperature. So one of the first things was like, well, people might use this to store beer, and might use it to store food. You'll find pretty quickly that these are used in lots of oil applications, which is probably noise you want to try to filter out somehow. But what was the example I found? Here was one. So this one kind of stuck out to me. Just an initial, and really what we're trying to do here is get ourselves in the right ballpark. With first searches like this, sometimes you'll find your invention right away. With something, that's going to be more complex, has a lot of different parts. It can be more challenging. So here's one. So I saw this. It's an apparatus for cooling food underwater and maintaining, temperature. So one thing that's important is, with patents like this, is you want to try to find, the abstract is always useful. I mean, from a patent standpoint, a legal standpoint, the abstract is, I'm sure JD's taught some of his webinars. The abstract exists so that people searching for patents can have an idea what the patent's about. That's largely what the abstract is for. So it often tells you what's in there. But really what you're looking for with patentability are specific teachings within the patent that are going to be, that may anticipate, or, for someone skilled in the art, if they had known about that teaching, would your invention be obvious to someone with that, that's good at designing, fishing coolers or submersible water coolers. You'll note, so, in terms of how the Google algorithm pulled this one up, we got a Korean patent. These are machine translated when possible. I like to use an American filed version of it or a US filed version of it. Mainly, you generally have, there's not translation issues usually, and you have clearer pictures. So one of the first things you're like, well, based on this title, seems like we're in the ballpark. And what I like to know with these initial ones, you want to say, okay, what do we have here? What kind of information can we glean out of this that will help us, kind of, for lack of a better word, fish more efficiently with our next search? Because a lot of these, the first stuff you do, sometimes you find something right away. Sometimes there's guess check, and a lot of iterations of that, and you kind of have to keep continuing through it. Some of the things you might look for here, or if you look at some of these classes here, these are CPC classes as opposed to USPTO ones. Initially here, I'm not particularly intrigued by these. JD, you'll see this is one of the challenges we have with this, is I have trouble finding good classes. Ideally, you'd find kind of a bullseye here that says, retractable, submersible container for regulating temperature. And if you find that, you're like, ooh, cool, let's click on that, and let's see all the other ones that are like that. What you can do is you can add the class to this here, and that'll search for things like this, but within also that classification. You could also, use a similar approach with a USPTO classification, but not through Google Patents. I'll go back because that wasn't. So here you may want to look for with a patent like this, what I try to find would be some type of, it appears to be an enclosable container. Probably a lot more moving parts here than what we're looking for, but I wouldn't want that necessarily to discourage you. A key concept for, as an inventor to consider when you're searching for patents like this is that, the reference doesn't, the reference can be very different from what you're finding, but it can have teachings that relate to your invention. For example, so this is and when I'm looking through these, what I'm trying to find are reasons to investigate further before you kind of throw this one back into the ocean and try a new search. Controlling water temperature, maintaining. One thing you notice here, this is defined as an apparatus. It's not called a box or a container. Those are good things early on in the search to take note of. Kind of like I mentioned, if you're just using the word thermometer, that could get you in trouble, because if you're using that as a keyword search, that's going to throw out a lot of patents. That might have kicked this one out. We could go back and show you. If they'll use that same search with the word thermometer in it, might not show up. This one, water temperature direction sensor, the thermistor. So one thing I would do with this, take the word thermistor, kind of come up here where, I was outlining a few different words that I would, call the main vessel. Probably, I want to have thermometer in here, thermistor, and I'm going to add thermistor to it. That's one thing. We'll see if we're going to go back and constrain that previous search by the word thermometer. Notice that one I was just looking at, even though that one wasn't gold, I wouldn't consider that a perfect reference that we're looking at. What I'm trying to illustrate is some of the constraints you run into with keyword searching. If I add the word thermistor back here, I suspect, okay, good, I didn't look like a fool, and it came right back up. So this is a good way to illustrate that principle of thinking broadly when you define your term, define both your invention and using keywords. And it's probably one of the more, people often ask if this is an art or a science. this is where it becomes both, is because, thermistor, if you asked me for 5 words for a temperature regulation device, that wouldn't have been one of the first 5 I'd give you. However, what I just gleaned is a piece of good information that's going to help me conduct the rest of this search more efficiently. So that would be one of the main things I would try to illustrate with this particular reference, is that you want to be broad and open-minded, especially early on in your search. Use lots of different terms, what it'll be, and then try to narrow those down. Looking at this one again, what I'll note, the other things I would want to do with this initially, because it's, this isn't a perfect match for the invention, but you want to find some things broadly and then narrow it down. As I mentioned, these international classifications didn't really stick out to me as something that's going to be particularly helpful. I like to look at the Uspto classifications for something too. Kind of what I'll do with the, what I'll take a copy of some of these. And did that really quickly. So this is the Uspto. This is the patent from the US, the same version of the thing. Of the patent from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Here are some of the Uspto classes from it. And what I'll do usually is just kind of keep a bank of these. So any patent I find that's reasonably relevant, I'll try to keep a log of these so that I can go back and search the actual patent database. A good example of this would be, if I were doing this search, starting with one, this was a good reference that JD had pulled for it. Look at it here. So you might do some, different varieties of keyword searching. You're going to call it an underwater container, like a water box, retractable reels, mechanisms, tethers, lots of things like that. This one stood out to me because this is probably, large containers for use underwater. Google just recently started doing something different with their international classes like this. But, trying to make that go away. So a good example here would be, as you kind of go through the you read through that, see what you can glean out of it. Here are some of the classes that were registered for, that were the patent examiners assign these to each, patent in terms of so they can organize them and search them efficiently themselves, so that you can help do that as well, or to help you do that. So, what I did was kind of, made a note of these and start looking through them. Another patent I'd come across, the classes associated were 43, fishing, trapping, vermin destroying. You look at this, you're like, probably not. But one way you might want to look at this would say, you could have a fish container underwater. You may find something in there. Back to where we were with this reference. Search this one, and a few things came out of that to me. I think that was here. Yeah. So another thing that's good to do with a reference, we'll come across this one. This one pops up through different keywords you find, and patent examiners they'll they're very smart and they're very good at what they do. So let them help you. Oh, okay, already. So if you click on this, cited by, each patent when as part of its prosecution, examiners will cite teachings from those patents against, your application or this previous application. Those are excellent places to look. Um, one downside of this is that you kind of have to judge the book by its cover, because what you get is the title. The star means that it was cited by an examiner, not just associated through probably that would have been cited. If it doesn't have the star, it was probably cited through the IDS that was part of the patent prosecution that your attorney will submit for you as you do that. Methods of freezing food, pressure containers. So you're really looking for something here that looks like you're just judging the book by its cover. And as much as I'd like to tell you that there's a silver bullet with these things, sometimes you get lucky and there is. This particular search is not that way. So what I might do here, device for cooling and refrigerating food. It's going to be related to this submersible thing, and examiners seem to think so as well. Let's check it out. One of the downsides of some of these foreign patents like this, often don't get images with them, which is a bit challenging. And I believe what point I was trying to illustrate with this one, and I think JD's mentioned in some of his articles some of the forward-backward citation searching. And that's a well-known technique, but it's something that differs from, what we started with keyword searching using classes, both USPTO and Cpc classifications. I'd recommend using both. The best way to overall summarize an approach, especially with a certain invention with a lot of broad features like this one, is to try a lot of different approaches and look for some convergence and start to see, hey, we're finding, we're using keywords and classes and finding several of the same patents in our queries. So this was, the reference here that I wanted to point out was that, the mobile device for storing, cooling food objects. Well, that looks pretty good. Let's check it out. Where is this going to go? Again, this is, so, went from, what we were seeing was the, that was a world, JD, you could chime in. What does the WO actually stand for? It's the world, I think it's not WIPO, but it's, anyway, it's a certain name for the WO ones, but it's an international one that generally pertains to a lot of different countries that you can file through. So this is a good reference. It's notable that we found this through, kind of almost like if you had to give it a name, some type of double backwards citation searching. But that's how we got there. And I think this was another one that JD highlighted as part of his search that was, pretty good reference. But first thing, come here, look at these. These are a couple classes I'd probably want to look at. Yeah, this kind of concerns me a little bit because, I'm picturing this invention being in an ocean, but that could be a flaw in how I'm looking at it because, from a mechanical functioning capacity, there's really no reason this can't be in a lake or a pool or an ocean. So those are all things that you want to have an open mind to as you look through it. But this is a pretty good reference, and that's how you might find something through citation searching. What do we have? These are the classes. Okay, this one. This was back here. So 114.256. So from that first reference that was pretty strong, they listed class 114. So let's come over here and see what it is. Ships. All right. I think we're like reasonably on the right continent here. So what I typically do would be good. Well, this one only had one 114s. So both of these, while I'm in this class, probably want to check them out. 256 is floating or semi-submersible storage vessel. This is maybe where your eyes light up a little bit. If you want a little bit more of a definition on this one, you can click that 256 I just did. It kind of comes down to structures which are containers of such construction that they remain partially in the water when used. I don't think I like that much, or that differs from our invention a little bit. This actually looks pretty good, which is, I think illustrates some of the, we came here looking for 256, but what I found that was actually useful is 257, because this device is not intended to be kind of floating up on top of the water. Possibly it would be more underwater. So what you find here, first thing you notice is that there's 95 patents in here. So clicking and checking each one of these is probably going to be pretty tedious. And this is, JD's taught us all a lot about using Boolean search terms. If you find the right classes, hopefully you can keep it simple. But let's see if that yields anything. Maybe we'll get lucky. Okay, not quite there. So what we've done is, drop the 95 or so patents down to 15 that are submersible containers that do something with temperature. You want to be careful. You want to try to use, temperature is a better search term here than thermometer, because you could have temperature regulation device, thermistor, thermometer. There's all kinds of transducers that can be used to sense temperature that you can describe super vaguely, and those vague terms are almost impossible to search by. So you want to try to figure out here, what's a correlated word that might be in here. Next one I might try is food, or maybe a can. I try some used to see there, but subsea fluid storage system. So you see a lot of these are related to like oil extraction and like storage of natural gas, compressed gas, storage of oil. It's a distinct possibility that those could contain teachings that would anticipate this invention. So that's an important thing to take away from that. So what we're trying to do here is decide if we're going to keep this one, spend 5-10 minutes picking through it, analyzing it, or throw it back in the sea. And if you want to do stuff efficiently, a lot of doing your own patent search is going to have to be a guess and check iterative process. So if every patent within a class that has, I think this one has probable cause to warrant being reviewed, but I'm not quite sure. I can't tell what it looks like. What would really be helpful is a picture. Because then, you can maybe have an idea what this is, how this is going to work. So like, subsidy may include one or more sensors that might be used to provide information operations. This is something I would take note of here. Suppose all the other references we had found were for things that were similar structurally, like it's a, container that you can put on a reel going underwater. We found things that maybe it has a propeller that moves it up and down, but we haven't found one yet that does it based on temperature. And this is always a real important thing we found the word temperature in here, that's great. But you need to make sure the context is right. And that's part of it that's going to be, because if an examiner is going to use your invention to try to make an obvious answer 103 rejection, he has to kind of there have to be teachings and reasons to connect the two ideas. So that's an important thing to try to find. And it's difficult to understand what that might be. One thing that's interesting here, this seems, I don't know if this is the exact same class, but it's familiar. That's good news. Seems like we're kind of playing in the right ballpark. I'm not sure if this is movable or not. So, this is probably. JD, do you have any questions you think that would be helpful or useful here?
I think you're great. I think if we're going to go in and as you go through these results, if you need to go back and if you would normally go back and check the invention disclosure, that'd be good to go over a little bit. But I think you've done a good job.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I don't think we're going to find something. I spent a couple hours on it this morning. I was like, man, I did not find anything else that was like, I was having trouble finding like a bullseye kind of keyword thing that would go to it. So hopefully what that does illustrate some techniques.
Maybe we should actually file this, Do you think it's actually, you didn't find anything spot on?
Well, off the record that I wouldn't put in the, the video, but, an invention like this, I don't see now what would concern me with this is that things like this are used in oil and gas industries where people are solving money problems that have substantial economic issue, or like substance is a good way to put it. Oil companies spend tens of millions of dollars on systems that do this. So that tells me they're going to spend a lot of money researching and patenting these things. A fisherman trying to keep his beer cold, I don't see, a device like this that costs $1,000 that someone would ever have tried to patent.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you so much for going through that. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful example you just went through. Does that kind of cover the I believe that covers sufficiently the patent research. Could you go in and do a bit on the non-patent research?
Yeah, I haven't prepped anything there.
Just kind of wing it if you don't. Is that something you want to do? Take 5-10 minutes and just talk about going into that.
Sure. Yeah, because especially with if we can go down that road, I think that's a good idea. So let's go. So it's also important. This happens a lot of times with, inventions that are, commercial products. Is that it's important to part of a patent, establishing novelty. With a patent is going to be making sure that you're the first person to ever think of it or anything that would, kind of anticipate someone thinking of this idea. So it's I always really like to look at an important part of these things is doing non-patent research as well. Ways I like to do this, this is a tough one because there's not a real clear, I would call this a submersible fishing cooler. pretty sure that anyone else looks at this is going to call it something different. So, you're going to have to try a few different, let's see, with weight. So maybe something that'll sink it. I look through, you try to find something here. Maybe submersible fishing cooler isn't good. We're not getting the answer that I want. I like to do with these things is, well, this is a light. Caught my attention though, because I'm looking for something underwater. I'll pull up the Google, I'll find these by images, and just look for something that looks like what I'm looking for. Another thing, maybe. Food chill cooler. I saw a couple patents for this that were, there's a lot of things for preserving and processing food. Not processing, but preserving food underwater. A lot of these things had to do with storing fish. I saw a lot of Chinese and Japanese patents doing the search. You've got some big markets that are designing similar products. So, not similar exactly like it, but things that, mechanically and functionally, you're trying to take a container, put it underwater, regulate its temperature. That's used in a lot of applications. That would be, in my opinion, potentially a extremely challenging field to both search and develop a real high degree of confidence that, there's not going to be a Japanese patent for keeping frozen fish cold underwater that isn't going to come out somewhere. And that's just, anytime you're, innovating in markets that have a lot of, economic, people, they're very well developed markets. Those can be challenging here. We're staring at fish. This isn't helpful. So let's, start over. When you're doing non-patent searches like this, you can use a lot more. You can use sort of layman's terms for things as opposed to, trying to, figure out what the, patent attorney legalese is going to be described, is going to use to describe those terms. And if there's any caution I give people with, or give inventors relying on keyword searching is that they're going to look for a thermometer and not a thermistor. And I do this stuff every day, and I made that same mistake. I think most other people would as well. So that's an important thing. If there's almost anything you can take away from this, it's that you have to, whatever you want to call this, you have to depart from that immediately. Like sometimes that'll get you, again, we're looking at, this is not helpful. And honestly, I've never heard of a device like this. I've never heard of a device like this. I don't really see a super practical use for it other than like keeping a cooler of beer cold in a boat while you're fishing. But I already searched for underwater coolers and nothing came up. I saw a lot of underwater fluid chilling devices, for keeping, like, suppose you have a factory and you make orange juice and you're in Japan. And you're like, well, we'll just store this stuff underwater instead of keeping it up, in a tank above water. I saw some things like that. I came across one patent for an underwater data center chiller, which I thought was kind of interesting. One, it was an interesting application because data centers use a ton of electricity to try to keep them cold. So if you can keep the water out there from freezing millions of dollars of computers, it's a great idea. Where did this one come from? I think this was one I came across. Yeah, this is maybe one of those examples I was talking about with, like, you have a fluid type vessel, or you make some type of rice wine or sake or something like that. You're storing it underwater. That's an application that I wouldn't think might be related to this particular invention. Um, but that's a whole rabbit hole of prior art you can go dig down, and you could probably find something. A lot of it comes down to how much time you will spend on it. If I were to spend 5 hours looking for stuff and someone else comes along and spends 20, they're going to find significantly better stuff than I will. And that's just kind of a, matter of this. If you're going to go look down every rabbit hole, you'll eventually find everything you need to. I'm just kind of walking through a few of the other ones that I found. Consumer products though, I found those Google image searches to be pretty useful for consumer products. Often when, especially for like homemade arts and crafts type stuff. Find things on Pinterest all the time. They're the exact idea, but you can look forever and you'll never find a patent on it. So it's, yeah, oh, here we go. This is the one I was talking about. I thought, so if I pull this up, this is a pretty interesting idea. It likely has some features of the invention, but it's not the same. But it's, potentially relevant as prior art. I don't know. So the same thing with this one, you might see what classes we have here, because even though you're using water to, cool something, this has an inner circulatory system. The invention doesn't. So you're probably going to have a lot of patents that are related to that, or classes that it's going to be noise. I think this is that same class we saw again. That's notable. This one looks like one, actually typically these 0-0 classes are pretty broad. So those are pretty good to use. When you get into the ones that are super duper specific like this, if the description's right on, sometimes you got a bullseye, but that could be a rabbit hole where you're just going to go there, see a bunch of patents that are kind of related, but not exactly right. So, one thing you'll see illustrated by this process here is that, here's one where I was using boat, because, the word boat, based on, kind of what we were thinking with this invention, obviously the boat has nothing to do with what we're going to claim as this invention. Maybe that it's suspended from a boat, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the word boat in the patent somewhere. So, that's kind of an example of using a search term that seemingly doesn't have anything to do with the patent or the actual invention. It may or may not help you. This is not looking like a very good place to hunt right here. We've got 27,000 results. The stuff at the top is not particularly relevant. You kind of see sometimes you sort of narrow things. The number of results here isn't always an indicative thing. This one stands out to me. I don't know if it's hard to tell or not, but I might check it out. Unfortunately, unless you find a class that's, especially with an invention like this that has a lot of different features, unless you find a class that's right on. And that first one we found with the submersible, the submersible storage container class in that 114.257, that was, for at least from the description of the class, about as much of a gold mine as I'd expect to find with a search. But, unfortunately, we didn't really see a whole lot in there that, at least off the surface, looked particularly promising. Sometimes you look in there and a good indication that you've done a good search is when you pull up, you find a few good, references doing sort of this meandering, random shotgun keyword approach strategy. And then when you narrow down a few of your classes, you go and look in the class, and those 15 that I narrowed it down to, say 6 of them, you're like, oh, I recognize that number and inventor. cool, I looked at that one, I either saved it or I didn't save it, but and that ties back to that kind of convergence element I was talking about, where it's like, well, we tried this whole scattershot approach, just trying to get in the right stadium, to try to find the right, these underwater devices that then have the right specific features, like the propeller, the thermometer, the temperature, device, potentially the control system that we're looking at. And sometimes you don't find it all in one place. You might find an underwater, that underwater sake storage bag. I'll just call it that has that temperature regulation system. And then I find just the floating buoy for holding, that just keeps something cold underwater, but it doesn't have any propellers or controls. And then, this is where your JD and your attorneys make their money, is the examiners can say, well, we got the sake storage bag, and then this one, you look at both of those patents, somebody who's skilled in the art, or, an engineer who designs these types of devices, they were looking at those two patents, would they put them together? And, good attorneys can make that, that's what they argue. So, doing these searches, I try to find the best teachings to make arguments with. And it's kind of a tough concept with your invention, but a lot of times those teachings don't, they're not exactly like your invention, but they do have, you look at, so anyway, I didn't even pick into this one yet, but that first sentence there, that looks encouraging. What we haven't seen yet is a picture. But it seems like it's a storage container for a boat. The key, I saw a couple of these things that are designed to kind of be hung right off the side of the boat, but directly connected to the boat, not on a leash going down into the water. I still don't know what we have here. This looks like it floats. This looks like a floating beer cooler to me, but what you might want to try to find is, like, are there any suggestions that on the water? So one thing that's important, another landmine, if you're an inventor trying to research your own patent, that you want to be very careful about, is that just because, let's just assume this thing is, close, but it floats on the water, but it has a temperature controller, and it has like a little paddle thing for pushing itself around, some type of control system. You have these wonderful things down here called yet another aspect of the disclosure. You'll see things that say a brief description of the drawings, usually in the detailed descriptions down here. It's important to pay attention to different parts of the patent. This is where you find your landmines and your problems, is that, you can have, and this is hypothetically, I haven't read this patent to tell for sure, but what you could have in here is, you see, looking for the word embodiment. This thing's, you see, inflatable. This thing looks like it just sits on top of the water. But you could see where there's another, in such embodiments. Often you'll see an alternate embodiment. The device can be designed to be semi-submersible. If, there may not be a picture of it, that is probably not going to be claimed anywhere, in the actual patent claims. While as an inventor, the power of a patent is only the claims for the most part, to speak really broadly, but the enforceability of it's generally, tied to the claims. That's what the real meat and potatoes of your patent is. From a prior art perspective, sometimes they help you, but that's not where you find your teachings. Often, those teachings, anything in the claims typically has to be supported by teachings and specification. So this is where you want to look. But you can often come in here and find in an alternate embodiment, the storage, whatever it's called, via the storage area, or the storage vehicle, whatever this is, can be designed to be submerged underwater. And, you know, I point that out. I was like, hey, this is potentially a highly problematic piece of prior art, if it said that, where it's like, hey, this thing has all these controls, and there's also this just kind of meandering teaching that, or, you know, some just, hey, oh, yeah, I might also want to make it so it goes underwater, too. You know, and it actually would be an interesting blog article because, you know, how that's dismissed from a legal standpoint and how JD and his colleagues are going to argue against the relevance of that, you know, such a hypothetical teaching would be an interesting, you know, blog article, at least for someone like me. But like, you know, I would see that as a red flag type of teaching, even though you wouldn't see anything related to it in the title, potentially the classes, or, you know, in the abstract and summary. You know, just have this 2 little sentence thing down here. It says, you know, in an alternate embodiment, the device can be submergible. And that would be potentially having some litany of problems. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. Again, that's hypothetical. I don't see it in this patent, but I think it's worth noting is that that's something you have to keep in mind. Is that, you know, as you're an inventor, you have to, and that's what your attorneys do as well. Is, you know, analyze these things fully and try to say, hey, where you know, all it takes is one teaching and one patent somewhere that would anticipate your invention that will make novelty very difficult to establish. So anyway, that's sort of sorry for the meandering dialogue on that, but I think it's an important, you know, if I were to give advice to an inventor at home doing their own search, that's something I would definitely consider, because the full extent of what is taught in patent is not in the abstract. It's in the entire thing. So, you know, you really need to look through it and see, you know, try to find those patents that are going to be related to your field and make sure they're not teaching or suggesting things that are going to anticipate the features you want to claim in your invention.
Brandon, thank you. I think that this is going to be a wonderful recording here. Is there anything else you wanted to get to?
No, we didn't even really plan to get into that, but that
Man, that's awesome. I'll have my editor kind of go crazy on it and cut, you know, what they think is the most salient points. Maybe cutting out some of the pausing and switching, and obviously the time you and I are talking. But I tried not to interject, and I think you did a great job.
Good. I hope that's helpful. Because, yeah, I tried to make it so that,
yeah,
you know, the best advice I could give is to an inventor trying to do this, and
yes.
hopefully what I'll illustrate is that, yeah, I mean, you know, I do this stuff all the time, and this is one I would have spent 5-6 hours banging my head against the wall with, and just like said, here, this is the best I could find. I don't like any of it, but here's some teachings that are like, you know, could potentially anticipate these features of it, you know. So, you know, it would have been easier to show them with something where there's like, you know, a 102 bullseye that you find in the class, and there's like, go find the class, and there's 5 things that are
right
kill shots. That would make for a better demo, something like this. But, you know, in terms of teaching people to explore the concepts, yeah, I got lucky with that thermometer thing.
Right, that was pretty cool. Yeah, the thermistor.
That makes the point perfectly.
Yeah,
you know,
that was
like,
perfect.
that's the exact kind of thing I wanted to find. It's like, here, you find this.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you. I'll, you know, of course, I'll share the final product with you. Make sure you're comfortable. I'm open to you also sharing it, or we can talk about how we want to market it. Like I said, I plan to just do a supplement to the patent search article with a sort of in-depth, true, you know, how to right down there showing all this detail. And I'm happy to.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm curious how like that hypothetical thing. I wasn't making that up. I see that all the time, where it's like, you know, the invention generally has the idea and the features of the other one, but they're like, well, yeah, we can also throw a propeller in there, and we can also put a thermometer in there.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and you're like, that's like, you know how that is, how you get around that. You know,
Yeah, my initial thought when I actually first conceived of this, you know, for this example, I was thinking of the exactly thing you touched on with the Japanese orange juice. I mean, it's you're making a product that's at room temp or even higher than room temp, and you want to be able to refrigerate it for free using Mother Nature, right? And so that was what yeah. And so I like the data center one. You had on some really good subjects. So
yeah, I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, let me. Yeah, what I'll do is I do plan to compensate you for your time on this. Did we agree $350?
Yeah, and I think that's, in line with how long it took. I mean, so
yeah, it's perfect. So I'll have that
I hope it's
noted.
helpful. It's like,
Yes, it will be. So
good.
I'll
I was super
jump.
stressed when we were starting because I was like,
Nah,
I really wanted to have like a plan to say, okay, here's some search terms, get
you
to the
did great.
class,
Oh,
use that class,
having to
get
be
to the
organic was
workshop.
perfect. And I think what was great too is that you also alluded to the fact that, look, this is going to take a lot longer than we have on the video, right? To do this right, you need to go pursue and chase some of these rabbit holes. So it gives yourself more credibility, and the actual search. And people are like, whoa, this is in depth. I can't do this on my own, or I don't want to do this on my own. I see how this is complicated. I
Yeah,
love
if I
the
saw
Google
that one,
images.
I would tell some that's the exact conclusion I'd walk away with. It'd be like,
Yeah.
oh,
That's what we're trying to do, right? Hey, here's how you
I'm
could
like,
do it. Do you really want to spend the time? Do you enjoy this kind of thing? No? Okay, hire us, right? So that's it. Really.
this is one I don't even want to do. Like,
I know. Well, thanks, Kim. I got to run.
Yeah.
I'll let you go. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
hey, sure
All
thing,
right.
JD. All right,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Thank you so much for being a part of this advanced Google patent search. It's been awesome to be able to share with you the screen and look at what I'm doing in terms of ways that I recommend you get in there and supplement the way that you're able to approach this right from the very beginning, to do the homework and the diligence it takes to research your invention and make sure that what you've got is going to make a big difference in the world. I'm JD Houvener, your patent attorney here at Bold Patents. It's an honor to share with you this content and to be with you here in this video. Have a great day, everybody. Go big, go bold.